Okay, moving down here, let's see. Dave Wellman is back. Hey, Dave. Dear Mr. Whittle, I and many other conservatives have become increasingly annoyed that fascism and Nazism are put into the far right of the political spectrum. Wikipedia is the main offender. Could it be that Europe did not experience the Enlightenment, which would be Locke, Burke, Jefferson, Monroe, as the United States has? Instead, they got the French Revolution and idealism, Hegel and Engels and Marx from their perspective. A despotic tyranny is right and a democratic tyranny is left. Wow, we get some good questions here. Normally, I like, what's your favorite color? Or, what was your pet's name? My understanding, David, I don't have it solidly anchored, just anecdotally from somewhere, but my understanding is that the original origin, not the secondary origin, the original origin. I used to work at the Department of Redundancy Department, and I'm here to tell you that's not good English. The origin of left and right wing was, I think it was in the German Reichstag, but it was some political party, some political assembly, like the Congress, like the House of Representatives, where certain people who were kind of communists sat on the left side, and people who were the fascists sat on the right side. So the left of the House, the right of the House, and so on. Jonah Goldberg just nailed this to the wall, and I've just run with the idea once it was introduced to me. I think Jonah Goldberg said, when communism and fascism fight each other, it's like a cola war. It's like Coke against Pepsi. We're neither of those two things. We are the exact opposite of both of them, which seems paradoxical in a way, doesn't it? Because if you put Nazis on the right, and just take all of the opprobrium off of it just for a second, just to understand the geometry. If you put Nazis on the far right and communists on the far left, then where are you? The whole analogy breaks down. There's no usefulness to it, and the reason there's no usefulness to it is because it doesn't reflect any sort of division into America. There are a microscopic number of Nazis in America, slightly larger number of actual communists, and left and right don't make any sense here by that definition. That's why whenever we get to, especially when we're talking to young people, I always get to the heart of it, and this is also tied up with the idea that, Republicans used to be liberals, and that, well, you're a conservative. Yes, I'm a conservative. I'm trying to conserve classical liberalism. Labels, labels, labels. Everything's sliding around. Everything's a mess. There is one distinction that I found to be universally good and is pretty much foolproof, at least in my experience, and that is, I think it comes down to, politically, there are collectivists and there are individualists. And that's pretty much it. If you look at it that way, you realize that both the Nazis and the communists are essentially the same thing. They're gigantic, big state collectivists who believe that the individual human being doesn't exist as we understand the term. They're cogs in the giant social machine. They should be willing, in fact, eager to sacrifice their only life for the greater good of the state, and that is what collectivists believe. Individualists believe precisely the opposite. They believe that the only reason there's a state in the first place is so it can protect my private life. It can protect my private property. It can protect me from predation and murder and all the rest. Otherwise, leave me alone. I'm an individual. I'm the only Bill Whittle that's ever lived on this earth and there ever will be, and there's only one of me in all of time and space, which is pretty cool. That just applies to me, by the way. The rest of you, there's millions of you. Billions, probably. But in any event, we don't belong there. With this, it's a false dichotomy. When you say communists are on the left and Nazis are on the right, you basically gone around the back and connected, behind you. Do you want to be both of them, by the way, as I'm sure you know, both of them, the Nazis and the communists, both of them in their names, their official names for themselves, basically both called themselves socialist. Nazi stands for Nazi is a contraction. It's an anagram of National Socialist German Workers' Party, and the Soviet Union was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So both the far left and the far right are socialist. Both the far left and the right are big state totalitarians, and Tea Party people and constitutional lovers don't fit anywhere on that spectrum, because that is a spectrum of collectivists, and we're individualists. And this is where this is where it gets interesting for me morally. I've used this argument before, especially on college campuses. The core belief of collectivism seems to make not only sense, it seems to be the only moral choice. Collectivists, I'm trying to be fair to them, totalitarian swine that they are. Collectivists will say that what is good for many people is more important than what's good for one person, and that seems to make an awful lot of sense. You can say, in your individualist society, all of this effort is applied to one person when there are all these other people in need. Surely the moral greater good would be to take care of as many people as possible with whatever resources you have. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, and it makes a lot of sense from just a, hey, you know what, that sure seems like a good idea to me, kind. But, and this is where I like to have fun with these people, but if you take it to its logical extreme, you come up with a very, very different world than the one we find ourselves living in and the one that we want to find ourselves living in. For example, if it's true that the greater good is what should be determining our actions, then I don't see any reason really to have a fire department. At the very least, I don't see any reason ever for firemen to go into a burning building. Why would you risk the lives of 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 men and women in their absolute prime who are able to contribute so much to society to go into to rescue an old woman whose life is almost over, or a cat for that matter? What on earth would prompt that decision from a collectivist point of view? It's absolutely nuts. If a soldier is wounded in a sort of a no man's land kind of thing, there's no conceivable reason for collectivists to go out and rescue that guy, because if you try, the chances are not only good, they're practically 100% that more people are going to be hurt or even killed in the rescue attempt. So why would you send 10 people or 20 people out to possibly get hurt or killed in order to rescue one person? Doesn't make any sense according to the collectivist worldview of, you got to do the best, the greater good for the most people. And what you find when you end up with the end of that belief system of being a collectivist, you find out that you're only dealing with theory. Everything is reducible to this is the greater good for the most people. Everything gets reduced to that. And unfortunately, in some cases, that comes down to things like, we're going to have to kill the Jews, and, Jeff, really feel bad about it, but that's going to be better for German society. Or these kulaks, these farmers who maybe hired another peasant. It's a peasant who owns a little bit of land, maybe owns an ox or a cow or something. They're stealing all of the food and keeping it and hoarding it for themselves, so we'll have to kill all of them too. Because once you get into this collectivist mindset, you realize that the world they've created is not a gentle world, it's a horror. They've built a machine made out of people, and the people are disposable cogs in that machine, and the only people who are not disposable cogs are the people at the top. I noticed that Lenin didn't launch his revolution and then go back to, was it Ekaterinburg or wherever he came from? He didn't launch his revolution and then go back. Stalin didn't get the Soviet Union through World War II and then retire in obscurity in Georgia. Mao didn't come out of nowhere and then just simply after he's launched the communist revolution go back. And of course, the classic example, the most unbelievable example, is Fidel Castro is fighting for the working man. He's a collectivist, and we're all in this together. And Cuba's going to be a society where everybody shares and no one has anything more than anyone else. And so you starve for 3 generations of Cubans, and then when Fidel Castro dies, you find out that his personal bank account has $900 million. And they all do, right? There's a pretty compelling argument that Vladimir Putin, who is at the very least a product of that system when it existed, it doesn't exist anymore. There's a fairly compelling argument that he might be the richest man in the world because he owns so much of this gigantic, huge country. So when people talk about socialism as being fair for everybody, what they're really talking about is I'm going to have the legal power to coerce you to do whatever I want to, and we're still going to have a social pyramid. And the problem is, if you don't know the right people, you don't get to move. Here in America, you get to move up and down as much as you would like. Now, conversely, individualists have a different view. And to me, it's not only a more moral view, it makes the kind of world I want to live in. And this is why it works so well. If you are an individualist and there is a wounded soldier out in the middle of a field, we'll send the entire platoon out there. We'll send the whole army if we have to get that person back. It doesn't make any sense at all on a calculation of human lives as stacks of wood or lumps of coal. It doesn't make any sense to sacrifice 30 lumps of coal to save one lump of coal, but that's not what we believe. We believe that that person out there in no man's land, lying on the ground bleeding out, is unique, and there's never been another person like him, and there never will be again. And he has family, and he has relatives, and he has probably children, and he's loved by many people and needed. And here's the part where it gets to be a little tough to explain to some people. But basically, what we say when we send somebody into a burning building, or when we try to rescue a soldier out there, when we follow the tenets of individualism, what we're basically saying is we are willing to give up the only life we have in order, or at least risk it, the only life we have in order to save somebody who's only got one life as well. And what's inherent in this is that we would expect and hope people to do that for us as well. And I want to live in a society where the full resources of society are mobilized to save individuals where they can be saved. And this is the essence of what a military person is and does. This is the essence of the warrior spirit, as I understand it from the outside. People go into the military because they want to defend this country. And what they're basically saying is, I'm willing to put my life at risk in order to protect all of the stuff that we see here, because I find the stuff that we see here to be beautiful. And I'm 20 years old, or I'm 40 or whatever, and I grew up in freedom. I was able to do whatever I want to. I wasn't afraid a day in my life of saying what I wanted to. And it might be worth my life to go out there and protect that for other people, because other people are individuals as well. And that is very different from a conscript who's being forced to take a position, human wave into machine guns, because if he turns around and runs, he'll either be executed when they catch him, or they'll have a blocking regiment or something back there where they'll gun down their own people. It's very different. Now, by happy coincidence, this ties into another question coming up, and where did it go? I'll try and get to it. Hey, yeah, there we go. It ties into a Chris Johnson question, so hold that thought about individualists versus collectivists in warfare.